"Johnny, there's something I need to tell you," said my neighbor's young daughter. "What is it, Krista?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I don't think I fit in like everyone else." I turned my head for a moment, hiding a small smile. "And why do you think that?" "Well," she said seriously, "I've looked at all the boys my age in the neighborhood and at school, and I can't imagine wanting to spend time with any of them." I chuckled. "Well, if they're anything like the kids around here, maybe you just have good taste. A lot of them seem pretty goofy." Krista laughed. "Why is it so much easier to talk to you than my parents?" she asked. "The other day, I tried joking with them about not fitting in, and they totally freaked out. They started yelling and telling me I was being ridiculous." She sighed. "My mom threatened to ground me for life, and my dad said I wouldn't be allowed to go to any sleepovers or have any at our house again. Not that I care. I only went to one, and that was enough. Most kids my age are so immature. All they want to talk about is silly stuff like who likes who or what's trending." She crossed her arms. "Meanwhile, if I try to bring up something interesting, like fractals, quarks, or string theory, they just stare at me like I'm the weird one. I have an IQ of over 200, and somehow I'm the odd one out." I nodded. "That must be frustrating. But you know, the first thing I asked was, why, while your parents just reacted." She sighed again. "Exactly. They never even asked me to explain." I gave her a thoughtful look. "Have you ever studied hereditary traits? You know, like how eye color or hair color is passed down from parents to children?" "Of course, Johnny," she said, rolling her eyes. "I was reading about that when I was 8. I've read everything I can about genetics, DNA, and molecular biology." I grinned. "Well then, you should understand that being crazy is actually inherited." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" I kept a straight face. "Parents get it from their kids." Krista started to nod, then froze. "Wait, that makes no sense at all, Johnny. How can parents inherit something from their children?" I shrugged. "I don't know, Krista, but think about it. Most parents seem perfectly normal until they have kids. Then suddenly, they start acting a little unhinged. Clearly, it's some kind of reverse hereditary trait." I watched as she tried to process my nonsense logic, her brain working through it. I couldn't hold back my laughter any longer. I started laughing. "Johnny, you are teasing me again," she accused me. I had to nod my head in agreement. "But only a little," I added. "How many of your friends' parents seem completely normal?" "To tell you the truth," Krista answered with a laugh, "not many." We both started laughing again. "You're the only one who ever teases me, Johnny," she admitted, somewhat wistfully. "Nearly everyone else is afraid to try and tease me because of my IQ, yet you do it all the time, and I almost always fall for it." "I love teasing you, Krista. In a lot of ways you remind me of my little sister," I said. I used to tease her all the time, before." My voice just kind of trailed off. "It's all right, Johnny. I know you loved her and miss her," Krista said. "If somehow I remind you of her, then I'm glad. But I don't like seeing you sad like this." "You said I remind you of your sister," Krista added, "and I know we share something in common. We both love you, even if you are a dork yourself." "Okay, Miss Brainiac, let me ask you something. Is being called a dork by a complete geek and nerd an insult or a compliment?" I asked, and we both laughed. "Johnny, I really mean it about how easy it is to talk to you," Krista said. "But it seems I can never talk to my parents," she added. "I mean, I can talk to them about science or engineering or computer programming, but not about stuff about being a kid. I think they are both a little afraid of me at times." Krista usually got home from high school. Yes, she is a senior in high school at age 14. About 2:30 each day, while her older sister Elizabeth usually didn't get home from the 2-year junior college she was attending until 4 o'clock. Their parents, Kelvin and Rachel, didn't get home from work until around 5:30 or 6. Since I normally worked out of my home, it had become a habit all school year for Krista to come over and hang out at my house until Beth, got home. I'd moved into the subdivision 2 years earlier and had quickly become very good friends with Krista's parents. Such good friends they'd trusted me to look after their daughter during the hour or so before Krista's older sister got home. "You know, if you weren't so old," she said, smiling, "and if I was a few years older, then I would probably let you kiss me. Just for scientific analysis, of course." I was 26. "And if I wasn't so old," I agreed, with a big smile of my own, "and you were about 4 or 5 years older, then I would be very interested in kissing you. Just for scientific analysis, of course." We both started laughing again. "Johnny," she asked in a very serious tone, "can you promise to keep a secret? I mean an absolute, cross your heart, and hope to die promise? You can never tell her I told you or she'd kill me. I mean kill me deader than an atom at absolute zero." "Of course, Krista," I replied. "My sister is in love with you. I was reading in her diary the other day about how hot she is for you," she began. Then we both heard a very upset voice. "Christine Lynn Adams, shut up," the voice commanded. Just then 19-year-old Beth, the sister in question, walked around the corner of my garage. Once again, just as almost every time I saw her, I was nearly struck numb at her beauty. This was, truly, one of the most beautiful girls I'd ever met. Beth was about 5 feet, 4 inches tall, and probably didn't weigh much more than 100 pounds. Her glorious red hair hung nearly to her waist, and Bethany had the most incredible green eyes. I could almost swear that her eyes were so deep that if you weren't careful you could just fall in and never reach bottom. Beth was slim and athletic, with strong, well-toned legs. She carried herself with confidence, and her posture reflected her active lifestyle. Her bright smile was one of her most striking features, but at this moment, it was replaced by a serious, determined expression as she approached her younger sister. I had always heard that redheads struggled to tan and were more prone to sunburn, but Bethany was an exception. Every time I had seen her outdoors, she had a natural, sun-kissed glow. Only today you couldn't tell she had a tan. Her face was as red as a tomato, and from what I could see the red extended down onto her chest as well. Her blouse only had the top few buttons opened, so you couldn't see too far, but from what I could see her chest was also a deep red. Krista was about 4 inches shorter than her sister and shared her slim and trim body. If I had to guess, I would guess she weighed about 75 pounds. I had no doubt that in a few years she would be Beth's equal in beauty. Krista also shared the glorious red hair and green eyes, and also usually had a deep, beautiful tan as well, but today, after being caught by her older sister, Krista's face was as white as a ghost. Beth was so angry she just ignored my presence as she approached her sister. I can't believe you've been reading my diary, and I can't believe you'd tell anyone what I wrote, she said, and was so angry her voice was trembling. I think about then she realized I was still standing there, listening to every word because she glanced at me. And I really can't believe you would make up stuff and say I'd written it, she added. Upon hearing the accusation against her, Krista's face turned red with anger. I didn't make anything up, Krista snapped defensively. You were the one who wrote about how much you think about Johnny and how you imagine things at night, she responded. Beth's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Krista, enough, Bethany shouted. Krista seemed to realize she had crossed an unspoken boundary between them, and tears welled up in her eyes. Beth, I'm sorry, she started, but Bethany immediately cut her off. Krista, just go home, Bethany said, in a very low voice. Before I do or say something I'm always going to regret. I think both Krista and I could hear the pain in her voice. Just please go home. Krista, Bethany again said. By now Krista was crying even harder and started to leave. I walked over to her and put my arms around Krista and gave her a quick hug. I leaned down and whispered, "It will be okay, kiddo, just give her some time. I'll try to talk to her, so at least she won't kill you yet." Krista sort of laughed, then kissed me on the cheek, before running out of the garage headed to her house, still crying. Beth and I just stood in the garage, neither saying anything for a minute. I was looking at Bethany, but she was just staring down at the floor and couldn't bring herself to meet my eyes. So, how much of our conversation did you hear? I asked Beth. Still looking down, Bethany started speaking. I was about to walk around the corner of the garage when I heard Krista talking to you, Bethany said. She was telling you something personal, and she was right about how badly Mom and Dad reacted when she told them. I was curious about what you would say, so I stayed back and listened, she admitted. I was really impressed with how you handled it. Krista was right about how much easier it is for her to talk to you than it is to talk to Mom and Dad, Bethany said, and it was all I could do to keep from laughing out loud when you told her insanity is inherited. That parents get it from their kids. Then she had to bring up my diary. Look, Johnny, I don't know what to say, she began. Hey, Beth, I used to have a younger sister myself, I answered, and she was always embarrassing me with things I shouldn't have said or written. When I told Bethany my younger sister was always embarrassing me with things I shouldn't have said, she started nodding her head in agreement, but when I hesitated, then added or written, Bethany again flushed red. I think I better leave now, Johnny, she said. I'm going to go give Krista hell for reading my diary and telling you what I had written. Beth was starting to walk outside the garage when I put my hand on her shoulder to stop her. I know you are very upset right now, Beth, and I understand, I began, but I would give anything or do anything if my little sister were still here to embarrass me that much. You never really realize how much you love someone until they are no longer around, I told Beth. My sister and I used to fight like cats and dogs, I continued, but we both knew we loved each other. Unfortunately, I don't think I ever really told her how much I loved her. I mean, she knew I loved her, just as I knew she loved me, but I never actually told her how much I loved her. And now, I never can, I finished. I couldn't help myself. I had tears running down my face. Beth, please don't talk to her when you're this angry, I asked. If anything, Just tell her you are too angry right now to talk, but you still love her, I advised. Tell her she really hurt you, but you still love her. In fact, that will probably make her feel even worse than if you just unload on her. Okay, Johnny, Bethany answered. I won't say anything yet. But how? How can I ever come over here again or even look at you, knowing she told you what I'd written? I was trying to figure out how to respond when both Bethany and I heard a blood-curdling scream that was abruptly cut off. Krista, Bethany yelled, and we both took off running. I paused just for a second to retrieve an old baseball bat from one of my workbenches. The bat was actually one I'd last used in Little League probably 18 years ago. It was only about 24 inches long, but was made of aluminum. I honestly don't know what made me stop for a second to pick it up, but I'm glad I did. Beth and Krista's house was literally next door in the cul-de-sac we live on, and Bethany had only run a few feet outside the garage where she had stopped. I almost bowled her over and couldn't help but notice the look of horror on her face. I looked over at their house, and I think I probably had the same look on my face as well. Krista was crying and seemed to be gasping for breath, while some guy had one hand clutching her long red hair and was wildly waving a large butcher knife around in the other. The knife was only a few inches from Krista's throat. Time seemed to nearly stop. I noticed that one side of Krista's face was bruised and bleeding, and both her knees were scraped and bleeding as well. The guy holding her was probably several inches taller than me. I'm 5 feet, 11 inches, but was emaciated. I doubt he weighed more than 140 pounds. He had long, stringy, greasy shoulder-length hair and was wearing filthy blue jeans and a t-shirt that might have been white at some point, but was now filthy gray. If I had to guess, I would have said he was in his late 40s or early 50s. His eyes were unnaturally bright, and I'd little doubt he must have been a hardcore narcotic user. He was shaking Krista by the hair and yelling at her to shut up, you little bitch, or I'll cut your throat. I looked around for a second and saw a couple of the neighbors were now coming out of their houses in response to Krista's scream. I was still holding the small baseball bat, so I reached around behind me and used one hand to pull my belt out a little, then slid the end of the bat into my belt. I was pretty sure he would not be able to see that I had any kind of weapon. All this, observing what was going on and putting the bat in my belt, had only taken a few seconds, but now time seemed to speed back up. I knew I only had a few seconds to do something. I nudged Bethany and told her to call 911 on her cell phone, then slowly started walking towards Krista and the creep. That was how I thought about him. I also started talking very slowly and deliberately and tried to look and sound as non-threatening as I could. I was also holding both hands out in front of me, so he could see I wasn't carrying anything. Look, sir, I began, you are really scaring the girl. Why don't you let her go? I'll kill her if you get any closer. Stop right there, he commanded. When I started walking towards him, we were about 50 feet apart, and I had covered about half the distance before he ordered me to stop. I again tried to talk, while slowly, very slowly, inching closer to him. Look, little girls make terrible hostages, I said. Why don't you let her go and take me instead? I have a car and I can get you out of here before the police get here or anyone gets hurt. I told him, just tell me where you want to go and we can leave now. I even have some money on me. Not a lot, but we can stop at an ATM and I can get you as much as you need. By now I was only about 15 feet away and he again ordered me to stop. I continued to talk very slowly to him, while moving closer at almost a snail's pace. You don't want some young kid who may panic and start screaming at any moment, I explained. Take me instead, and we can get in my Jeep, and I'll take you anywhere you want to go. I can get you all the money you need, even a couple of $1,000s, and you can also have my Jeep. Just let the girl go, I told him. He started looking wildly around, and I used the opportunity to close to within about 10 feet. When he looked back at me, I stopped and raised both hands. Look, I am not carrying anything, and you have a knife. I'll do anything you want, take you anywhere you want. Just let the girl go. Look, I'll even put both hands behind my back. As I said this, I moved both hands behind me, while again moving a little closer, and taking that opportunity to remove the bat from my belt. I could see that he was actually thinking about what I'd said. You can get me a couple of $1,000s? He asked. Yes, sir. I can get you $2,000 or $3,000 if you'll let the girl go, I answered. Okay, but keep your hands behind you, he ordered. If you move your hands, I'll kill you. And with those words, he flung Krista away where she fell in a heap on the ground. He started moving over to me, while holding the knife straight out in front of him. I had already released the bat from my belt, and now it was like hitting a ball on a tee. I stepped closer and swung the bat as hard as I could. The bat caught the knife in the hand holding it, along with the wrist, and made an incredibly satisfying sound. I could hear the bones breaking, and the knife went sailing 20 or 30 feet away. He screamed and tried to reach over with his left hand to grab his now severely injured right hand and wrist, and I just reversed the trajectory of the swing and now caught his left elbow and forearm. Again, I could hear the bones breaking as he screamed again. So far, I had been concentrating on disabling his hands, but now I tried to imitate a golf swing as I swung from the ground right up between his legs. I think I hit a home run. At the very least, there were 2 balls that would never be used again. He collapsed on the ground, unconscious. I threw the bat down, then ran over to Krista, who had been watching everything from only a few feet away. I knelt down beside her, took her in my arms, and all I could say was, "You're safe, Krista. You're safe now, honey. You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore. I've got you, baby. I've got you." Krista was obviously still dazed by what had happened, but she suddenly threw her arms around my neck and started crying hysterically and squeezing my neck. Her shoulder was against my throat, and she was squeezing so hard I literally couldn't breathe. It took 30 seconds to loosen her arms enough so I could take a breath. Then Krista just started repeating over and over, "You saved me. Johnny, you saved me. You saved my life." By now Bethany was beside us, and she was crying and trying to hold Krista, but Krista refused to let me go. Bethany finally had to put one arm around Krista and the other around me. All 3 of our heads were just inches apart, and Bethany was crying and crying, then tried to start talking to Krista. She kept telling Krista how much she loved her and how sorry she had gotten angry with her. Krista finally let go one of her arms, and she and Bethany were now hugging and telling each other how much they loved each other and how sorry they both were for what had happened in the garage. Krista still refused to let go of me with her other arm and continued to hug me even after the police arrived. She hugged me the entire time the police were there getting statements and spent most of that time with her head resting on my chest. She continued that after the ambulance arrived. She wouldn't even let them examine her without sitting in my lap, with one arm around my shoulder or neck. They put bandages on both her knees and doctored up her face as much as they could, and Krista still refused to let me go. Beth had also called her parents, Kelvin and Rachel, and soon they were there. Krista finally let go of my neck long enough to hug her mom and dad, but was soon back in my lap with one or both arms around my neck. One of the neighbors had recorded everything on her cell phone, and she played it over and over for the police, the guys in the ambulance, Krista's parents, and any of the neighbors who wanted to watch. The police were calling me a hero, Krista was calling me my hero, her parents were calling me a hero, Bethany and the neighbors were all calling me a hero. Then the hero threw up all over the ground, barely getting Krista out of my lap, so I could fall forward on my hands and knees. I must have thrown up for several minutes. I couldn't even make it back to my place where at least I could have puked in private. I puked in front of Krista, Beth, their parents and our neighbors, the guys in the ambulance, and the police. Of course, one of the neighbors also recorded my puking on their cell phone as well. Krista knelt down beside me the entire time and kept one hand on my back. Soon, Bethany was on the other side, and her hand joined Krista's in rubbing my back. The EMTs, emergency medical technicians, said it was actually a fairly normal reaction for such a stress-filled activity, but it was, and will always be, one of the most embarrassing things to ever happen to me. And now the neighbors have it recorded for eternity. I've read hundreds of books about all kinds of people doing all kinds of heroic things, both fiction and real life, and written a few myself. Why is it I've never read about the hero losing his lunch after doing something other people call heroic? I'll try to make a long story short about what happened to Krista after she left the garage. She was still crying really, really hard and had stopped running and was then walking very slowly home. She wasn't paying any attention to anything around her. Krista let herself into the house and had already walked a half-dozen steps inside when she finally looked up and saw the creep standing in the living room. She immediately turned around and took off running. Fortunately, she'd been so upset with what happened in the garage, she had not closed the front door, so she didn't have to stop and open it. She'd run a half-dozen steps outside the house when the creep tackled her from behind. Since she was on the concrete walkway leading up to the house, when she was tackled, she scraped both knees on the concrete, and the side of her face, where it hit the concrete, was also bruised and scratched. As she was being tackled, that was when she was finally able to unleash the terrified scream Bethany and I heard. She was still in mid-scream when she hit the ground, knocking the wind out of her lungs. The rest you know. The police later told us the creep had an arrest record longer than your arm and was actually suspected in the assault and murder of at least 2 young girls. At least he will never be able to assault anyone again, even if he ever gets out of prison, which will be almost impossible. The baseball bat made sure none of his equipment would ever function again. He actually had to have both testicles removed due to the damage caused by the bat. Krista refused to let me out of her sight the rest of the day and evening. She wouldn't even let me go home to change clothes and brush my teeth after throwing up, becoming almost hysterical when I tried to leave. I finally had to send Bethany to my house to get some clean clothes and a toothbrush, and Krista had to sit right outside one of her parents' bathrooms while I took a shower, brushed my teeth, and changed clothes. Bethany sat beside her the entire time. As soon as I walked out of the bathroom, she leaped into my arms again, and I had to carry her to the living room. Rachel and Bethany cooked dinner for us, and I had to sit at the dining room table beside Krista while we both ate. After we moved to the living room, Krista insisted in sitting on one side of me, while Bethany sat on the other side. We all, Beth, Krista, Rachel, and Kelvin, talked for a couple of hours. Krista finally fell asleep, sitting beside me. Kelvin picked her up and carried her to her bed. I wouldn't be surprised if Krista slept for 12 straight hours. She'd been through more than anyone, especially a child, should ever have to go through. Despite her IQ, despite her extraordinary mind, she was still just a child, just a 14-year-old. Luckily, today was Friday, so there was no school the next day. Beth had gone with her father when Kelvin picked Krista up, but quickly came back into the living room. "Johnny, I'm going to lay down with Krista for a little while. But will you promise, I mean really promise, not to leave without telling me?" she asked. Of course, I told her, and was more than a little surprised when Bethany gave me a very tight hug and kissed me on the cheek, then lightly kissed me on the lips. Rachel and Kelvin came over and also gave me a hug. Rachel was really crying while Kelvin had some tears as well, but was doing better at hiding them. "Johnny, what do you say to someone who saved your daughter's life?" Kelvin asked. "Words just don't seem enough to show how much what you did means to us." Rachel started crying even harder and gave me another hug. Rachel looked like an older version of her daughters. Same red hair, same green eyes, same slim and trim body lines. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Like Beth, Rachel probably weighed around 110 pounds and was actually a little shorter, probably about 5 feet, 3 inches. A little more buxom, but they really could have passed for sisters, not mom and daughter. Kelvin was a couple of inches shorter than me, probably about 5 feet, 9 inches, but weighed at least 220 pounds, maybe more. And not an ounce of fat. His shoulders were immense, his arms were huge, and his legs looked like tree trunks. Kelvin also had the most extensive home gym I've ever seen. I don't think there was an exercise machine made Kelvin didn't own and used nearly every day. He told me I was free to use any of the equipment anytime I wanted, but after a couple of times working out with Kelvin and the girls, I finally had to stop. It was a little embarrassing to see Rachel lifting heavier weights than I could, and even Bethany usually matched the weights I'd lift. Not to mention the sight of Rachel and Bethany wearing just sports bras and very short shorts while working out made it a little difficult for me to concentrate on weights. I could almost have sworn Bethany would deliberately wait until she knew I was looking at her and then bend over in front of me, or strike some provocative pose. If it weren't for the 7-year age difference between us, I would have thought she was interested in me. I knew that was ridiculous since Bethany could have any guy her own age she wanted, and the last thing I needed in my life was an angry father, upset with me for messing around with his, back then, 17-year-old daughter. I did my best to be nice, but a little distant with Beth. Kelvin had reddish auburn hair and blue eyes, and was, and don't take this the wrong way, one of the best-looking guys I've ever met. If you could describe a guy as being almost pretty, then that description fit Kelvin. In fact, the only thing marring his features was a nose that looked like it had been broken a couple of times. And on Kelvin, it just seemed to heighten his other features. I knew he and Rachel owned their own company, where they made electronic components for missiles. Rachel was actually chief engineer. I knew Kelvin had graduated with a degree in engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, while Rachel had graduated, with honors, from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and had added both a master's degree and a PhD in engineering. We are talking about some serious brainpower here. I knew Bethany was also incredibly smart and had no doubt she had a genius-level IQ. Unfortunately, from previous conversations with Kelvin and Rachel, I also knew Bethany had rarely applied herself during high school. Since it was so easy for her to get good grades without even trying, she rarely really tried in high school. That was the primary reason she was attending the local junior college. She needed to get serious about her education and, from what I had gathered, was really doing well in her first year of college. I like to think a few, actually more than a few, conversations with me about the importance of college had something to do with how serious Bethany had become about her education. Krista has already tested as well above a Mensa-level IQ. What I didn't tell you was, despite the fact she was a senior in high school, she was also taking college courses from the same junior college Bethany was attending. In fact, Krista was scheduled to graduate from both schools in the same week. High school diploma from one and associate degree from the other. Krista also spoke at least half a dozen languages I knew about and read, and wrote in even more. She is the only person I know of who has read Tolstoy's War and Peace in the original Russian, Dumas the Count of Monte Cristo in the original French, and Homer's Iliad and Odyssey in the original Greek. Johnny, I know you are a freelance writer and I've read some of your stories in different magazines, Kelvin began, but I also know those magazines probably don't pay a lot. Look, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'd like to offer you a position with my company. I know I can pay you a lot more than you are currently earning, he said. To be honest, Johnny, I don't even know how you are able to afford to pay your mortgage in this subdivision. I know what these houses sell for and I don't understand how you even qualified for a mortgage without a steady source of income. I also know your house was listed at well over $1 million when you bought it. This is not some kind of gift for saving Krista's life, he hastened to add. Rachel and I have talked about this and about you before. Our company needs a public relations director, and I'd like to offer you the job since you have a degree in journalism. I'm talking about a real job, making really good money. You'll work your butt off, but the rewards are really great. What do you say? Will you come work for Rachel and me? He finished. I didn't say anything for a minute or two, wondering just how much of my life story I should share with them. I finally decided that, in the circumstances, only the whole, unvarnished truth would suffice. Kelvin, Rachel, I really appreciate the offer, but money really isn't an issue for me, I began. You asked how I can afford to make my mortgage payments. Actually, I don't make any mortgage payments. I paid cash for my house, I told them and could see the surprise in their eyes. I've already told you some of my background, but I haven't told you everything. You already know I graduated from the University of North Carolina with a degree in journalism, but you don't know about some of my other writings, I said. I then began my story. I was just beginning to get ready for my first year of elementary school when I was diagnosed with glandular fever, which is also known as infectious mononucleosis. Basically, there is no treatment other than rest, so my parents kept me out of first grade for the first 3 months. Glandular fever is caused by a virus and thus does not respond to antibiotics. But glandular fever also reduces your body's ability to fight infections, and when I scratched my leg, while playing outside when I wasn't supposed to, and developed a severe infection, doctors gave me a shot of penicillin. That was when we found out I was allergic to penicillin and nearly died. To make a long story short, I missed my entire first year of school. If nothing had happened, due to the way my birthday fell, I would have been one of the older students in class. Having missed a year, when I did start first grade, I was over a year and a half older, in some cases 2 years older, than anybody else in my class. I've always loved books. Nothing makes me happier than sitting down and reading a book. I actually started reading when I was 5, so for the year I missed in school, I read nearly all the time. Obviously, simple books, but books nevertheless. Due to my love of reading, I also started writing every chance I got. I joined the high school newspaper staff my freshman year of school so I could learn more about writing. When I was a freshman, I got my driver's license, which is something most high school students don't receive until at least their junior year of high school. Shortly after the start of my sophomore year, the teacher in charge of the newspaper staff asked me to write a story about an upcoming school function, then take it to the local weekly newspaper in town to see if they would put it in the paper. When I walked into the real newspaper office, the first person I saw was a much harried guy who seemed to be trying to engage in 2 different phone calls at the same time. He was also trying to run around the office with a phone stuck in each ear. I waited until he was finished and he looked at me and said, "What do you want?" I introduced myself and told him I was from West High School and had a short article we were hoping he could put in the paper. He actually grimaced and told me to give it to him. He read the article and then looked at me. Read the article again and looked at me. "Who wrote this?" he asked. When I told him I had, he said, "Wow, most of the stuff I get from high schools is garbage and looks like something an 8-year-old would write. This is really professional." That was my introduction to one of the most influential men I'd ever meet in my life. Richard Dink Jones was the editor and publisher of the Dispatch. And in case you were wondering, Dink was the name for a half roll of newsprint. In later years, I would met other men in the newspaper and printing business with the nickname Dink. Dink invited me into his office where he explained the actual newspaper staff consisted of him, 1 full-time reporter, a part-time sports editor, and 2 other part-time reporters. He also had a secretary and a part-time typesetter. But other than those, they counted heavily on stringers for a lot of their stories. A stringer is sort of a freelance writer. Dink then asked if I would be interested in becoming a stringer for the paper. I, of course, jumped at the opportunity. One of his biggest needs, he said, was someone to cover football and basketball games at my high school, plus other sports such as soccer or baseball. There were 4 high schools in the county, and the part-time sports editor had to try to rotate between different schools. Dink said he'd also welcome feature stories about interesting people, or people with interesting or unusual hobbies. When Dink asked if I had a camera, I told him photography was one of my hobbies and my father had bought me a really good camera, plus I had a complete darkroom at my house where I could develop and print black and white photos. Back then, digital photography was still in its early days. That particular day being Friday, my school had a home game that night. I covered the game, took a number of photos, and after I got home, wrote the story, printed 3 or 4 photos, and delivered them to him the next morning. Dink read the story, looked through the photos, and said, "This is amazing. This story is better written than what my sports guy normally writes. And the photos are great." Dink went through the story with me, line by line, and made a number of changes, but again said he normally has to do a lot more editing with the stories from his sports guy. I still remember Dink sitting down and taking out his checkbook and writing me a check for $45. My first professional paycheck. Normally, he only paid his stringers $20 for a story and $5 for each photo, but he was paying me $25 for the story and $10 each for the 2 photos he was going to use because they were so good. He made me promise to not tell anyone how much he was paying me. Over the course of the next year, at first I had 1 or 2 stories in each weekly issue, then 3 or 4, then 5 or 6 articles. As I began writing more and more, it would not be unusual for me to have 10 or 12 stories in a single issue. Most were either sports-related or features about different people. What I didn't know was that every year, the North Carolina Press Association would have a competition among its membership for Newspaper of the Year, Story of the Year in different categories, and Photo of the Year, sports, news, or human interest, just to name a few categories. The competition was divided into different classifications, depending on the type of paper, daily or weekly, in circulation. Thus, a medium-sized weekly like ours would not be competing against large daily newspapers with their vastly greater resources. Dink, without my knowledge, entered a number of my stories and photos into the competition. My first year as a real writer and I, in the paper, won Sports Story of the Year, Sports Photo of the Year, Feature Story of the Year, and Human Interest Photo of the Year. I was floored when Dink told me about all the awards. Dink also presented me with my official North Carolina Press Association press pass. It was better than a get-out-of-jail-free card in Monopoly. For one thing, it was real, and while the get-out-of-jail-free card would get you out of jail in Monopoly, the press pass would get you into just about anything. I could now go to any museum in the state free. I could attend any high school, college, or even professional sports game free. I could go to Carowinds, an amusement park similar to Six Flags, free. And not to mention, now that I was semi-famous as an award-winning reporter for the local paper, my social life really picked up. Girls who normally wouldn't be interested in someone like me suddenly became interested. And some of those girls were, in fact, married women. It was just about the best time of my life. Shortly after I started my junior year of high school, Dink called me in a panic. He had to cover the county commission meeting that night, and his full-time reporter was supposed to cover a city council meeting, also taking place that night. Only his full-time reporter was in the hospital recovering from having his appendix removed. Dink asked if I could cover the meeting. This would be my first hard news assignment. I had no idea the meeting would change my life. I always read every story in every issue of the paper, so I already knew that a couple of the city councilmen had a rather acrimonious relationship. Of course, no one suspected their heretofore war of words with each other would get physical at that night's council meeting. Halfway through the meeting, one told the other, "That's the stupidest thing I have ever heard you say," which coming from you is really, really stupid. The next thing anyone knew, they were exchanging punches and wrestling throughout City Hall. Of course, I had my camera with me, so I got a number of photos of the physical confrontation, complete with blood dripping down faces. Both men were arrested and hauled off to jail, so I used my press pass to gain entry to the jail, where I saw the assistant police chief. His daughter attended my high school, so I knew them both rather well, and he allowed me to interview both men while they were locked up. The next day was the day the paper was printed, so I immediately went to the newspaper's office, where I typed up the story about the meeting, a separate story about the fight, and the rather contentious relationship between the men, and a third and fourth story based on the interviews with both men. As I was finishing, Dink came in. His meeting had been very boring, but had lasted several hours, so my story was the first he had heard about the fight. The next day, the entire front page of the paper, plus several inside pages, was filled with my stories and pictures. That same day, the state's largest daily newspaper, the Charlotte Journal, called Dink. They had heard about the fight and wanted a story. Dink faxed them all my stories, as well as emailing copies of the story and most of the photos. Rather than rewrite the stories, the editor of the journal asked Dink if they could simply use his stories, and they would of course give our paper full credit. Dink agreed, but only if they included my byline. The next day, almost the entire front page and several inside pages of the state's largest daily paper was filled with my stories and photos, and my byline was included on every one. The editor of the Charlotte Journal was really impressed with the quality of the writing and photographs, and asked if I would be willing to drive to Charlotte, about an hour away, and meet with him. That turned out to be one of the funniest meetings I've ever had. The editor, with the rather pedestrian name of Tom Smith, was in his mid-50s and, at least sartorially speaking, almost the opposite of Dink. Dink rarely wore a tie, almost never wore a jacket, and I think you could almost tell what he had for lunch by examining the food stains on his shirt. Tom Smith was dressed in a suit with vest and wore a bow tie. Impeccable is probably the correct word to use to describe his attire. I remember the first thing he said after meeting me was, "Damn, now I know I am old. Every year you journalism majors seem to get younger and younger. Why, you look like you should be in high school." "Well, sir," I answered with a smile, "that is because I am a high school student. I'm a junior in high school." I actually had to get out my high school identification card and driver's license before he would believe me. The rest of the day, he took me all over the newspaper building and introduced me as a damn high school kid who just wrote the story of the year. It turns out his words were prophetic. I not only won the first place award for news story and news photo of the year for the weekly paper I was working for, but at the same time won the same awards for the daily papers as well. I was soon a stringer for both papers, which continued even after I enrolled in college. My senior year of high school, I also started attending classes at the local junior college so I could get some of the required courses out of the way. I actually began my college life as a sophomore. Midway through my junior year, the editor of the Daily Charlotte paper called me and asked me to stop by his office, saying he had a special assignment I might be interested in. North Carolina was home to one of the most prolific and most reclusive writers in America. Every 2 years, for more than 30 years, Sebastian Cabot Vandiver would release a new book. He has won every conceivable writing award, including a Nobel Prize for Literature and a Pulitzer for both fiction and nonfiction. He had also not given an interview to anyone, television, newspapers, or magazines, in over 20 years. His last interview had not gone well, and he always claimed the guy was really trying to do a hatchet job on him. The editor of the Charlotte paper had been trying to get him to give an interview for more than 15 years, and Vandiver would always turn him down. Several weeks earlier, Tom Smith had sent Vandiver another request for an interview, but this time sent over 30 stories I had written, dating back to the very first sports story I had ever authored. He also sent a short bio, including that I had written that first story while still a sophomore in high school. For whatever reason, Vandiver finally agreed to a 1-hour interview, but only with me and only if I came by myself. I presented myself at his estate at the scheduled 9 a.m. for the 1-hour interview and left 10 hours later at 7 p.m. I had so much information, the one story turned into a week-long series that was not only printed in the Charlotte paper, but also picked up by the New York Times and virtually every other major daily newspaper in the United States. It was even reprinted in the other Times, the Times of London, sort of the holy grail for journalists. I had also taken over 100 photos of Vandiver, many with his beloved dachshunds, and over the course of the week-long series, most of those were used as well. And, of course, every story included my byline, and every photo included in the caption who took the photo. It was heady stuff for a college junior. After the series was printed, I received a handwritten note from Vandiver asking me to stop by his mansion again. Vandiver told me it was simply the best stories about him he had ever read. Then he surprised the heck out of me. "How are you coming on your novel?" he asked, completely out of the blue. "How did you know I was writing a novel?" I answered. Vandiver said he had started in the newspaper business and knew that inside every journalist is a novelist struggling to get published. He explained that nearly every week, he would get 2 or 3 manuscripts from people, asking him to just look at my book, and yet I had spent 10 hours with him and never once brought it up. "I wouldn't presume to ask something like that," I truthfully answered. "Well, if someone offers, then you aren't presuming anything," he said. I told him I was about halfway through, and if I really worked at it, I could be finished in another 6 or 8 months, which would roughly be by the beginning of my senior year. Vandiver asked me to email him the story when I was finished, and a few days after my senior year started, I did exactly that. I wasn't really expecting to ever hear from him again, but 2 months later he again asked me to stop by so we could discuss my novel. To say he ripped it to shreds isn't completely accurate, but close. He told me what he liked and what he didn't. He said to lose certain storylines and expand others. He suggested several possible plot twists that I had considered, but didn't think would work. He didn't make any actual changes, just numerous suggestions on what and when to tighten and when to loosen up, and left it up to me to use my best judgment. About midway through my senior year, I emailed it back. This time, when we met, he only had 2 or 3 suggestions, which I completed in a few days. After I emailed those to him, he said he would get back with me. A month later, I received a call from the publishing company Vandiver used, asking me to fly to New York. They offered me a contract and gave me an advance check against projected book royalties for $100,000. Vandiver was also at the meeting and for only the second or third time in his career wrote the foreword for a book. It was unbelievable how quickly the novel took off. When I mentioned to Kelvin and Rachel that Vandiver wrote the foreword, Rachel actually jumped and started to say, "Wait," but then said never mind and to continue the story. In a month, the book was on the New York Times bestseller list. A month later, it was in the top 10, and a month later, it hit #1 for 27 straight weeks. Every month, I started getting a check for 6 figures from book sales, and the amount of the checks kept increasing. The horrible downside to this was the day I graduated college. I'd received a dozen advance copies of the book 2 days before graduation and immediately autographed copies of the book for my parents and my younger sister. I had not mentioned anything to them about the book, not even the fact I was writing one. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. On the day of my graduation, my parents and younger sister were driving to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for the graduation when they were hit head-on by a drunk driver. They were all, including the drunk driver, killed instantly. I didn't know about the accident until after my graduation. Inside each of my parents' coffins and my sister's coffin was an autographed book. A year after the book was published, I sold the film rights for $500,000, and the producer of the film paid me $100,000 to co-write the screenplay for the movie. 2 years after the first book was published, my second book came out. Only this time my advance check was in the mid-6 figures. By the 3rd month of publication, I again started receiving monthly 6-figure royalty checks. Film rights to the second book were sold for $750,000, and I was paid $200,000 to co-write the screenplay. I'm still receiving royalty checks from both books, I told Kelvin and Rachel. So, as you can see, money is not an issue. I could never spend what I have now, plus I still get very large checks each month. Wow, said Kelvin. Wait, if you are such a successful author, why haven't we ever heard your name before? You can thank Vandiver for that, I explained. I told them the 3rd time I met Vandiver. In New York, he told me one of his biggest mistakes was using his own name. Now I can never go anywhere without someone recognizing my name, he said. I haven't been to a movie, a restaurant, or even a museum in years, he complained, unless I want to wear some kind of stupid disguise. Being famous has its perks, but it has an even darker side also, Vandiver added and suggested if I ever do get published to use a pseudonym, or nom de plume. I wanted to honor my family, so I used my father's first name, my grandfather's first name, and my mother's maiden name, I said. Oh my God, said Rachel. Christopher Winfield Hunt, she whispered. I nodded yes. But I've heard of you, Kelvin said. In fact, I think we have both your books here. As soon as Johnny mentioned Vandiver wrote the foreword, I think I knew, Rachel said. I've read both books, and I remember reading the foreword. The publishing company also thought it would be a good idea to make the author kind of mysterious, I said. Plus, they were worried no one would buy a book written by someone who was only 22 years old at the time. I asked both Kelvin and Rachel to not say anything to anyone about my being Christopher Winfield Hunt, and to especially not say anything about my books to Bethany or Krista. I want to tell them myself, I said. They agreed, and I was getting ready to leave when I remembered I'd promised Bethany to not leave without telling her. Rachel went to Krista's bedroom to get Bethany, and a few minutes later, she walked into the living room. It was obvious she had fallen asleep. How's Krista? I asked. Completely lights out, Bethany said, rubbing the sleep from her own eyes. I told Bethany I was leaving, and she immediately said she wanted to walk me home. When I told her it wasn't necessary, she insisted, so I finally agreed. As we crossed over into my yard, Bethany grabbed my hand and asked me to stop for a minute. She turned around until we were both facing where Krista was being held earlier that day. Do you know what I was thinking about when I saw Krista and that creep? Bethany asked. Before I could say anything, Bethany answered her question. I honestly thought he was going to kill Krista right in front of me, and I kept remembering what you said about, you never really realize how much you love someone until they are no longer around, she said. And especially about how you never told your sister how much you loved her, and now you never could. I thought Krista's last memory of me was how angry I was at her, and she would never know how much I love her, Bethany said as she began to cry. I opened my arms and Bethany stepped inside and put both her arms around me, and I held her until she stopped crying. Holding hands, we finally walked the rest of the way to my garage where the roll-up door was still open. I flipped on the light switch as we stepped inside. Johnny, if I don't tell you this now, I don't know if I ever will, Bethany began. We were only about 6 inches apart when she let go of my hand and placed hers on my chest. There was one thing Krista got wrong. One thing I never wrote in my diary, she said. Only one thing? I teased with a smile. Bethany seemed to recall everything Krista had said earlier, and her face turned a deep shade of red, even the tips of her ears flushing. After a brief silence, she continued, completely ignoring my comment. I never wrote that I loved you or that I was in love with you, she admitted. I wrote how cute I thought you were, and later that I thought you were someone I could fall in love with, and even imagined I was in love with you. and I wrote about some of the things I wanted to do to you and wanted you to do to me. But I never put in words I was actually in love with you. I found out this afternoon that I am in love with you. Do you know when I realized I was actually in love with you? I told her, no, I didn't know. After everything was over, when you started throwing up, she started to say. Before she could say anything else, I interrupted. Oh, great. I complained. The most beautiful woman I've ever known tells me she is in love with me. Then I find out she is some kind of crazy, deranged pervert who gets turned on watching men puke. Wham! Bethany actually punched me on the shoulder. Damn, to be so small she packs a hell of a wallop. No, you idiot. Not men, just you, she said with an exasperated grin. Now I don't know whether to hit you again or kiss you. Do I get a vote? I deadpanned. Then Bethany was again in my arms, and we were kissing. Oh my God. I have actually kissed a lot of women in my life, but I don't think I have ever had a kiss that seared my soul like Beth's kiss did. Because of my work for the local paper throughout high school, I actually had an unusual social life. I rarely had conventional dates while in high school, since I was always so busy. But I quickly found out that some women seemed to be attracted to someone who is quasi-famous. And having your byline appear in the paper week after week seemed to meet that definition. What was most unusual for me, at first, was that most of those women were older than I was, sometimes a lot older, and in fact a number were married. I was taught, not only about sex, which is easy for a young male, but also about making love to a woman, which is a lot more difficult. In high school, most of the women in my school who seemed most interested in me were the rather geeky and nerdy ones, not necessarily the prettiest. It was still great. In college, that changed. Now as I became more famous for my newspaper writing, the really pretty ones started pursuing me. Not necessarily the brightest, but some of the prettiest. It was still great, but I soon realized that some of the truly sexiest ones were not always the prettiest. And when I found one both smart and beautiful, well, it was magical. After selling the film rights to my first book and being asked to help write the screenplay, I moved to Hollywood for 3 months. In Hollywood, the only nights I ever spent alone were by my choice. I was surrounded by some of the most beautiful women in the world and took full advantage of most of the opportunities presented to me. And there were lots of opportunities. After the first 2 months, however, I found myself seeking more than just beauty. I wanted someone I could talk to after a couple of hours of hot sex. That was a lot more difficult to find in Hollywood. After the screenplay was finished, I moved back to North Carolina, but wasn't really completely happy with my life. The truth was I missed my parents and sisters so much, and being in North Carolina just seemed to always remind me they were no longer with me. In Hollywood, I had more than my share of fame, and will always be grateful to Vandiver, not only for his help in getting my first book published, but also his advice about using a pen name to write under. My publishing company actually helped me obtain a completely new identity. I am not sure if it is entirely legal, but I have a driver's license and credit cards in my nom de plume, plus my real identity as well. I had fame when I wanted it, but most of the time I had complete freedom when I needed it. I also had a boatload of money, more money than I'd ever dreamed of in my life. I spent the next year in North Carolina, completing my second novel. As you can perhaps imagine, considering what had happened with the death of my parents and sister, the second novel was much darker in tone, and even more successful. After finishing the project, I moved back to Hollywood to work on the screenplay for the second film, immersing myself in the fast-paced entertainment world for 2 months. After a while, that lifestyle lost its appeal, and I decided to relocate to Florida, where I bought a house next door to Beth's and Krista's parents. For the past 2 years, I had been focused on writing my third novel, while also contributing articles to magazines and newspapers under my real name. Now, the novel was with the publisher and set for release in the coming weeks. I wouldn't say I completely avoided relationships during my first 2 years in Florida, but my priorities had shifted. Every few months, I would spend some time in Miami, enjoying the vibrant city life and meeting new people. When you booked the most expensive suite in the most expensive hotel in Miami, it was incredibly easy to find a beautiful woman, or even women, to spend the nights with. Only on rare occasions would I find a woman I would bring back to my house in Florida, and that never lasted more than a day or so. Now Bethany and I had kissed for several minutes, and it just seemed to get better and better. Our tongues were deep in each other's mouths, and she was rubbing her body against mine. I can honestly say I have never had a more passionate kiss in my life. And it wasn't just that Bethany was so beautiful. I have kissed many, many beautiful women. I knew Bethany was incredibly smart. Yes, she hadn't really applied herself in high school, but it was obvious after just a few minutes of conversation how smart she actually was. If she wasn't genius level, then she was so close it didn't matter. But I have also kissed many very smart, beautiful women as well. There was just something different about Bethany I think my soul identified with. I think I can say that I had finally found someone I could consider spending the rest of my life with. After finally breaking the kiss, neither of us could even talk at first. Finally, Bethany began the conversation. "Oh God, that was even better than I ever imagined it could be," she said. I couldn't help but agree. We just held each other for another couple of minutes. "I was trying to tell you something," Bethany said, "before you kissed me." "Hey, I didn't kiss you, you kissed me." "No, I was trying to talk and you kissed me. The only thing stopping you from talking was when you put your lips against mine." "No, you kissed me first." "No, you kissed me first." Then, suddenly, we were kissing again. It was even better than the first time. When we came up for air the second time, we were both gasping for breath. "That was incredible," Bethany said. Again, I agreed. "But if you don't stop kissing me, I'm never going to be able to tell you what I want to say," Bethany added. Of course, that prompted another round of, "Hey, I didn't kiss you, you kissed me." "No, you kissed me first." "No, you kissed me first." The only thing that stopped a third passionate kiss was when Bethany hit me again. Wham! In the exact same spot on the shoulder. "Damn, not only are you a pervert who likes to watch men puke, you also are a sadist," I complained, but with a smile. "If you don't shut up, I'm going to find that baseball bat and show you just how much of a sadist I really am," she answered, but with her own incredible smile to take the sting out of the words. "I was trying to tell you what the older EMTs said," Bethany began, "before you so rudely interrupted me by kissing me." I was just starting to open my mouth to answer her when Bethany held up her clenched fist and said, "Stop. Don't even start it again." I closed my mouth. "After he watched the video on the cell phone, then watched you throwing up, the EMT told me he spent 3 tours of duty in Vietnam with the Marines," she said. "People have the wrong idea about what makes a hero. They think a hero is someone who is not afraid. People who are not afraid are called psychopaths. People who are afraid, usually terrified, and do what needs to be done anyway, they are the heroes." He said he'd met many people like you in Nam. Ones who did something incredible to save other people's lives at the risk of their own, then started throwing up afterward. He asked me if you were my boyfriend, and suddenly I realized how much I loved you, and had been loving you for a while. I told him that yes, you were my boyfriend, you just didn't know it yet. He laughed and asked me to tell you something. He said for those people who have served in combat, there is no higher accolade than this. I would be honored to serve with you. He then asked me to tell your boyfriend I would be honored to serve in combat with him. I was stunned. I actually began crying a little, but Bethany gently reached up with her hand and wiped away the tears. "See, that's why I love you." I was just starting to kiss her again when Bethany turned her head. "Johnny, there is nothing. I want more right now than for you to carry me into your bedroom so we can make love all night long." "I think I hear a but in those words," I answered. She nodded her head. "If it is the but I am thinking of, then I understand and agree," I said. She looked at me with a questioning look. "I think, but, Krista, is the but, you mean?" I said, and I could see the relief in her eyes at my understanding her situation. Krista may sleep all night long, or she may wake up in an hour. And she may wake up not really remembering everything that happened at first, or she may wake up screaming. In either case, she needs someone there who loves her completely, I added. "Johnny, I am afraid that if you kiss me again, I may not have the strength to leave you tonight. And right now, my baby sister needs me even more than I need you, or you need me. But I promise, I will make it up to you." Beth then rose up on her toes and kissed me on the side of my face. "I love you, Johnny. I mean that. I love you truly." Beth was just starting to leave the garage when I called her back. "Hey, Beth, I'm sure your parents want to spend all day tomorrow with you and Krista, but if your parents agree, would you and Krista like to spend Sunday with me? We can take my boat out and spend most of the day on the water." "You have a boat?" she asked. "Yeah, it's not that big, but pretty nice," I said. "I would love that, Johnny," she said, "and I know Krista would as well. She loves boats and water. Why don't we plan on having breakfast together Sunday morning around 8? Then the 3 of us can spend the day together," she offered. "That is a date," I said. "My first date with 2 beautiful girls." Beth blushed a little. She again started to leave when I called her back again. Beth, I think there is one other thing I think you should know, and if I don't tell you now, I don't know if I will be able to later on," I said. When she asked what, I began to explain. "Krista said you wrote you sometimes used your fingers on yourself and thought about me," I said. Beth blushed scarlet red again. "Well, you are not the only one. There has been more than one night when I did the same after seeing you in some of your bikinis." And it was my turn to blush crimson red. Then Bethany was in my arms, and we were both crying. When Bethany tried to kiss me, this time I turned my head and told her if we kissed again, I would never be able to let her go. We just held each other for 10 or 15 minutes, until finally, it was time for Bethany to walk back home. "See you Sunday," Beautiful, I said. See you Sunday. Handsome, she answered. I really didn't think I'd be able to sleep at all that night, just thinking about what happened during the day and about the upcoming Sunday. But I think I must have fallen asleep within seconds of lying down. I got up early Saturday and spent most of the day at the marina where I keep my boat, making sure it was absolutely spotless and stocking it with plenty of food and drinks. I really meant what I'd said about spending all day on the boat Sunday and wanted to make sure everything was ready. It was late Saturday night when I got home and was just getting ready to go to bed when my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, both Krista and Bethany were standing there. Krista immediately jumped into my arms and wrapped her arms around my neck. Johnny, I never thank you for yesterday. Thank you for saving my life. Johnny, I love you, she said, as she gave me a kiss on the cheek. And I love you, too. Krista, I answered. How are you feeling today? She was still wearing bandages on her knees, but the bandages had been removed from her face. All things considered, her face didn't look that bad. Some swelling and bruising, but I knew it could have been a lot worse. Not bad, but I wish everyone would just stop asking me that. Everyone treats me like a kid, she complained. She told me to put her down, so I did. Then Bethany and I just stood there looking at each other and smiling. We were standing about 2 feet apart. Finally, after a minute or so, Krista said, Well, are you two going to kiss or what? Then we were in each other's arms and yes, we kissed. Took you long enough to kiss each other, Krista said, and then smirked. Maybe I should start offering suggestions on what you should be doing to each other? That won't be necessary, little sister, Bethany said with a huge smile, looking directly into my eyes. I am sure we can figure out what to do all by ourselves. Beth said Krista refused to go to bed until she'd a chance to thank me and had been driving her crazy asking when I would be back home. We talked for a few minutes about our boat outing the next day, then Bethany and Krista walked back home. But not until Bethany and I kissed again. I frequently have trouble falling asleep at night, but for the second night in a row, I think I was asleep within seconds of my head hitting the pillow. The next morning, I ate breakfast with Kelvin, Rachel, Bethany, and Krista. Then the two girls and I all piled into my Jeep Cherokee for the 30-minute drive to the marina. Beth was wearing a pair of shorts that left very little to the imagination. If she just stood straight, you could see the upward curve of her buttocks. And if she bent over? Oh, my God. I had to make sure Bethany was not walking in front of me. If she was, I couldn't take my eyes off her beautiful rear. I nearly walked off the dock once when she ran ahead, then bent over to pick up something off the planks of the dock. Arriving at the marina, we walked out onto the extensive series of docks. The smaller boats were all near the entrance, and soon we had walked past those and were walking towards the larger boats. Soon we had passed all the 20-foot boats, then 30-foot boats, and were now walking amongst the 40-foot boats. Johnny, I thought you said you had a small boat? Bethany asked. Before I could reply, Krista jumped in. Size is a relative concept, big sister, she said, then added with a smirk, besides, they say size doesn't matter. I instantly remembered a conversation with Kelvin, Rachel, and Bethany several months earlier. It was just a few days after Krista's 14th birthday, and Kelvin and Rachel had invited me over for a cookout by the pool. When I walked over, Krista was playing in the pool and the rest of the family was gathered around the grill when they were all laughing uproariously at something. Bethany was wearing another of her bikinis that should have been outlawed. It was all I could do not to gawk. I remember it took incredible willpower to tear my eyes away. What's so funny? I asked. I was telling Bethany about a conversation I had with Krista from a couple of years ago, said Rachel. It was a conversation I should have had with her even before, but I had been putting it off since I knew Krista would have 1,001 questions. You know how she is, Johnny, Rachel said. Indeed, I did. Krista had an insatiable curiosity to go along with her above genius level IQ. A simple conversation with Krista could turn into a deep psychological quiz at any second. Plus, she knew things that no kid should already know at her age. Since she had just turned 12, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer, Rachel continued. I knew it was time for the talk. You know, about sex. I had spent a week on different websites, trying to make sure I would be prepared for any questions, she said. What happened? I asked. Well, I told Krista it was time we talked about the bird and the bees, about human reproduction and sex. She put down the fractals she always studies as a hobby, put her hands in her lap, looked at me, and said, Okay, what did you want to know? We all burst out laughing. That is typical Krista. What happened next? I inquired. I spent several minutes discussing information I had read on various websites when Krista suddenly interrupted me and said, That's not entirely true. Dr. Anthony Schneiderman wrote in last month's New England Journal of Medicine that this is actually a common misconception. She then started explaining his research on widely accepted but often incorrect beliefs about human behavior and common myths. I was so engaged in the conversation that I started asking her questions, until I suddenly realized I was having a deep discussion with my 12-year-old daughter about scientific theories. We all laughed. I really feel sorry for any guy when she sets her sights on him, Rachel said. He'll never know what hit him. Yeah, Kelvin added. Once Krista makes up her mind about something, her brain is like an unstoppable force, like a tidal wave or hurricane. You can't fight it. All you can do is try to survive it. We all laughed again and then enjoyed dinner. Later, as we walked through the marina, we stopped in front of one of the most stunning boats I had ever seen. It wasn't the biggest one there, but it was definitely one of the most striking. It was an Italian-made Pershing 45, and everything about it radiated elegance and craftsmanship. My God, Johnny, that is the most beautiful boat I've ever seen, Bethany said in awe. It was then both girls noticed the name on the boat, Nom de Plume. What an unusual name, Bethany said. Why did you name your boat pen name? I told them I would explain later and suggested we get on board. I quickly gave them a tour of the boat, which included the 2 staterooms, each with its own bath, the galley, and the sun-bathing areas up top. All the cabinets were of beautiful cherry wood and both staterooms were air-conditioned. Krista was ecstatic about the boat and had her usual 1,001 questions, but Bethany was strangely subdued and would barely respond when I asked her how she liked something or the other. Finally, Bethany couldn't take it anymore. She was almost crying as she looked at me and said, Johnny, I have seen boats like this before and I know they cost around $400,000. How can you afford something like this as a freelance writer? I tried to explain that it actually wasn't new, so I'd gotten a very good price from the previous owners. That was when Krista piped up. Yeah, he only paid $345,288.23. I was completely stunned. Just off the top of my head, I couldn't have told you the exact price, not down to the cents. Now Bethany actually is crying. Oh my God, Johnny, you're a narcotic dealer, aren't you? That's the only way you can afford your house and a boat like this. Now I'm still trying to figure out how Kristen knew the boat cost $345,288.23. Don't be silly, Beth, Krista said. He paid for it from his book royalties. If I was stunned before, now I'm shocked beyond belief. I mean, almost heart attack-inducing shock. Beth, book royalties? What book royalties? Me, mouth open, but no sounds coming out. Krista, Johnny, if you don't close your mouth, bugs are going to fly in and breed. Beth, what book royalties? What is she talking about, Johnny? Me, mouth still open, no sounds coming out. Krista finally reaches over and pushes up on my jaw, forcing me to close my mouth. Beth, what is she talking about, Johnny? What book royalties? Me, completely ignoring Beth. How? How do you know about the book royalties, Krista? Beth, what book royalties? Krista, well, I already had my suspicions, but I wasn't completely sure until I hacked into your publisher's computer. Beth, what book royalties? What publisher? Me, you hacked into the computers of the largest book publisher in the United States? They told me they had the most secure computer system money could buy. Beth, what publisher? What book royalties? Krista, I knew as soon as I tried it would be difficult. So first I broke into your house and hacked your laptop. Me, you broke into my house. You hacked my laptop? Beth, you broke into his house, Krista. What book royalties, Johnny? Krista, I broke into your house. I hacked your laptop. Book royalties for writing books, Beth. Beth, you write books, Johnny? Krista, yeah, he writes books, Beth. Me, yeah, I write books. How did you break into my house, Krista? I have a state-of-the-art security system. Krista, Dad owns the security company, Johnny. Beth, it was the first one he ever started. Krista, and Mom wrote the software. Beth, and I could bypass your security system as easily as Krista could. Krista, dream on, big sister. Beth, well, almost as easily as Krista could. Krista, still, dream on, big sister. Beth, well, I could still get in if I really wanted to get in. I was getting whiplash trying to follow the conversation. Beth, what book royalties, Johnny? Me, you could break into my house if you wanted to, Beth. Krista, yeah, either one of us could bypass your security system. I can just do it a lot faster than Bethany can. Beth, what book royalties? What publisher? Then wham. Bethany hit me in the exact same spot on the shoulder where she had hit me Friday night. Only a lot harder. Beth, what freaking book royalties, Johnny? Me, rubbing my shoulder because my entire arm almost went numb. I mean, she packs a whale of a wallop. I've written a couple of books, Beth. They were both bestsellers and both were made into movies. But I write under an assumed name, thus the name of my boat, Nom de Plume. Beth, who the hell are you, Johnny? Me, I am Johnny. Look, I was going to tell you both today, but this wasn't exactly how I'd planned to tell you. Well, I used my father's first name, his father's first name, and my mother's maiden name. Beth, what name, Johnny? Me. Well, I write under the name of Christopher Winfield Hunt. Beth, Christopher Winfield Hunt? Oh my God, you are my favorite author. Your 2 books are my favorite 2 books I have ever read. Wham! She hit me again, in the exact same spot. I can't believe I've known you for 2 years, and you never told me who you are. She said, oh, I can't believe the man I'm going to marry is also my favorite author. Me marry? Krista, wait until you read his 3rd book. Beth, I found it when I hacked into his publisher's computers, and it is the best one yet. Beth, he has a 3rd book? Oh God, Krista, you've got to let me read it. Me marry? Beth, I can't believe it. Wow, this changes everything. I'd planned that after we got married. Me married? Beth, totally ignoring me. I was going to quit college and get a job so I could support my husband. Me husband? Beth, as he continued as a freelance writer. I know money would have been tight, but we would have had love to keep us together. When I got home at the end of the day, after standing up all day long, my husband, Johnny, me husband, Beth, would massage my sore feet, then we would make love all night long. Me married? Husband? Krista. Really, Johnny, you need to close your mouth before bugs fly in. Beth, but now, after we get married. Me married? Beth, my husband. Me husband? Beth, can spend all his time between writing by massaging my feet and making love to me. We have to have at least 4 kids. Me kids? Beth, 2 boys and 2 girls. Krista, reaching over and pushing up on my jaw to close my mouth. Do try to keep your mouth closed. Johnny, you look like a complete idiot otherwise. Beth, thank you for pointing that out, Krista. I wanted to say something, but didn't know how my future husband would feel about it. Me, future husband? Krista, you know, Beth, after you and Johnny stop pumping babies out of your incredibly fertile body. Me, baby's fertile body? Krista, incredibly fertile body, I'm sure. Beth, thanks, little sister. Krista, don't mention it, big sister. Yes, after the 2 of you stop pumping babies out, I should be 18 or 19 then, with at least 2 degrees from MIT. So I think I will let Johnny be the father of my children also. Me, your children? Beth, keep dreaming, Krista. Krista, Beth, have you ever known me not to get what I want once I set my incredible mind to it? Beth, Krista, I think I liked you better when you weren't so persistent. Krista, I might even let him be my first dance partner. Me, first dance partner? Then me, will you 2 stop it already? I feel like a damn ping pong ball getting smacked back and forth. This time I was ready. When Bethany tried to swat at me again, I ducked. Unfortunately, that left me wide open for Krista's playful shove to my shoulder. Luckily, it was my other shoulder, and Krista doesn't hit nearly as hard. Krista, he gets a little emotional, doesn't he, big sister? Beth, that's one of the traits I most admire, little sister. It means he is very passionate. Me, passionate. Krista, I figure I'll stop after having about 6 babies with Johnny. Me, 6 babies? Beth, 6 babies? Krista, yes, 6 babies. And they will all be girls and be just like me. Me, 4 babies with Bethany and 6 babies with Krista? I need a beer. Beth, 6 little Kristas running around. Me, 6 Kristas? Oh God, I need a case of beer. Beth actually got me a beer, which I drank in one long swallow. While the 2 members of the Looney Tunes gang started discussing baby names, I muttered something about casting off and putting out to sea before I starting shooting someone, probably beginning with me. They totally ignored me. I cast off the lines holding us to the dock, then started the twin 610 horsepower engines. The deep-throated roar of the engines usually both calmed me down and yet also fired me up. I love the sound. Today, I especially love the fact that that was the only sound I could hear. Bethany and Krista were continuing their discussion about God knows what. I only knew I did not want to know what they were talking about. 30 minutes later, I found a deserted cove along the inland waterway and dropped anchor. It was actually with a very deep regret I turned the engines off. I slowly walked over and took my seat, with a great deal of trepidation, between the 2 sisters. Krista, you said you already had your suspicions about my having written those books even before you hacked my laptop and the publisher's computer? She nodded her head. Yes. What did you mean? What kind of suspicions? Well, Mom and Dad didn't want me to read your books. I mean, of course they didn't know they were yours, but they didn't want me to read the books by Hunt, cause of some of the adult scenes and language. At the time, it wasn't a big deal, because I really wasn't into fiction that much. So it was about a year after you moved in next door before I read the first book. Then immediately started the second book. But the strange thing was, while reading, it somehow seemed, I don't know, familiar. I knew that wasn't possible, but I couldn't get that feeling out of my head. And somehow it seemed that it had something to do with you. At first, I thought maybe you reminded me of one of the characters in the book, but when I started thinking about it, there were really bad, awful guys, or there were really smart or really good-looking guys. None of those applied to you, she said with a huge smile. Good one, little sister, Bethany chortled. Thanks, big sister, Krista said, as they actually exchanged a high five. I just shook my head. Beth was always driving me crazy talking about your articles in different magazines, insisting I read them, and one day I realized there was actually a similarity in the style of writing. I'm not saying this to flatter you, Johnny, or to give you a swelled head, but you have a unique gift. You are incredibly descriptive in your writing. What Rembrandt does with paint, you do with words. Wow, I said, I have never been compared to Rembrandt before. It's true, Johnny. When I read one of your articles in Travel magazine about Savannah, I could actually imagine my being there. Your descriptions are so detailed and beautiful. You paint pictures with words. I noticed the same thing about the books by Hunt. He wrote incredible detailed descriptions of places I have never been to, but after reading his words, it almost felt like I had been there. I really didn't think much about it at the time. I just assumed all writers probably write somewhat similar. It was one word that really got me to thinking. One word? I asked. What word? I had kind of gotten hooked on your writing and would search the internet for stories you'd written. One day I read the series of stories about Sebastian Cabot Vandiver, and in the story you mentioned his longtime assistant, the man who took dictation and actually put on paper what Vandiver was thinking. You called him his amanuensis. That was only the second time I'd ever seen the word. The first was in a book by Hunt, and I remembered I actually had to look it up. That doesn't happen very often with me, so it stuck with me. Well, one word doesn't necessarily mean a lot, but later I found another word, or phrase, actually. In a story about Charleston, South Carolina, you wrote about the lambent beauty of sunlight dancing over the waves. In Hunt's second book, he'd used almost the same exact words. Again, I had to look up lambent. I was wondering if this was just pure coincidence. So, I did what any other almost 14-year-old would do. If the other almost 14-year-old had an IQ of over 200, I downloaded every single story I could find you'd written. Then I downloaded the complete text of both of Hunt's books. And I wrote a computer program to search for obscure, rarely used words. I found 27 matches. Words that no one really uses. Except for you and Hunt. And I started remembering conversations you had with Bethany, or my parents, or me, when you would use some of those same words, and how descriptive you could be when talking about some of the places you visited. That was why his books seemed familiar to me. Next, I expanded the search to include unusual phrases. I found 34 seldom heard phrases in your writing and in Hunt's writing. Statistically, I pretty much had my proof, but it still wasn't 100% certain. Then I decided to hack the publishing company that printed Hunt's books. Of course, I quickly realized how sophisticated their security software was, and while I could probably hack my way in several hours, someone would be sure to notice and shut the system down. The obvious thing was to hack your laptop. If it had the same security software, it would almost confirm my suspicions. Plus, if I could hack your laptop, then I could quickly get into the publisher's computer. And that's what I did. I thought for a minute, then said, but I almost always take my laptop with me, in case I need to write something. I even brought it with me today. Yeah, but you don't take it with you when you play golf, Krista countered. Remember 7 months ago? Dad called you late at night and asked you to play in a tournament the next day? She said. I did remember. One of his regular partners had to cancel at the last minute, so Kelvin called me. Well, when I heard Dad invite you, I knew this would be my opportunity. So I borrowed some of Dad's office stationery, typed an excuse saying I had a doctor's appointment and a taxi would pick me up at school. You forged Dad's signature? Asked Beth. I didn't need to. I just scanned Dad's signature, then printed it on the excuse, in a different ink color of course. The school never questioned it. The taxi picked me up at school at 10, and by 10:30 my laptop was hooked up to your laptop, and an hour later, I was in the publisher's computer. I also wrote a backdoor program that allows me to access your computer from anywhere, anytime I want to get in, even if you think it has been turned off. I was amazed. I mean, I knew how smart Krista was, at least I thought I did. But this was just unbelievable. Wait, I said. You knew to the penny how much I paid for this boat. Did you also hack my financial software? At least Krista had the decency to look embarrassed when she admitted it. Hacked is really not the right word, Johnny, she said. Anyone who uses their birth date as a password is asking for trouble. By the way, do you ever check your investments? If you can even call your pathetic returns an investment? Hey, I'm a little conservative, I admitted. No, Johnny, a 90-year-old widow is conservative. Your investments are a lot worse than that. Beth, did you know Johnny used to have a huge amount in passbook savings? Krista said, earning less than 1%, and that average yearly rate of return on all his investments was barely over 2%? Me used to? What do you mean used to? Beth, you're kidding? How can my future husband support me and 4 kids with investments like that? Not to mention your 6 kids? Me, future husband? For kids? 6 kids? Krista, it's really kind of pathetic, isn't it? Beth, yes it is. I mean, he is kind of cute, in a barbarian, Neanderthal sort of way, but passbook savings? Me, what did you do, Krista? Beth, what did you do, little sister? Krista, I redid his entire savings portfolio, big sister. Me, what did you do to my money, Krista? Beth, what did you do to our money, little sister? Me, our money? Our money? Beth, yes, our money, Johnny. After we get married, it is our money. Me, married? Krista, he's kind of slow on the uptake, isn't he, big sister? Beth, yes, but that is one of the things I love most about him, Krista. He needs me. Krista, he needs you, Beth. Me, will you two nitwits stop talking about me like I'm not here? Wham, wham, they both hit me. Beth, you really shouldn't call your soon-to-be wife and the mother of your first 4 children names, Johnny. Krista, not to mention your favorite sister-in-law and the mother of your next 6 children, Johnny. Beth, hey, why do I only have 4 children and you get to have 6, Krista? Krista, I don't know. You are the one who said you wanted 4 children. Beth, well, if you are going to have 6, then I think I should have 6. Krista, of course, Beth. Do you think Johnny can handle 12 kids? Me, in a desperate, strangled tone. 12 kids? Krista, anyway, getting back to his finances. For the past 6 months, Johnny has earned an average rate of return of over 20%. Me, 20%? Krista, does he always repeat everything he hears? Beth, I think so. That is one of the things I love most about him, little sister. It's really cute. Krista, since I became his financial manager, he has actually earned more interest in the past 6 months than he did in the prior 2 years. Me, financial manager? Krista, I actually think I should get paid a commission. Perhaps like a sports agent, 10%. Me, 10%. Beth, 10%. That sounds fair, Krista. But do you think Johnny and I should then charge you a stud fee, like ranchers do for breeding with a prize bull? Me, stud fee? Krista, do you think he's really worth all that much, Beth? Me, oh my God, Beth. Don't tell me you are going to go along with this lunacy. You are going to rent out your husband like a prize bull? Oh, wait, did I just say your husband? Krista, I think he's finally beginning to understand, Beth. Beth, remember what Daddy said about Krista's mind, Johnny? It's like a force of nature. If you try to oppose it, you'll be destroyed. All you can do is try to survive. Me, burying my head in my hands. I need a beer. I need a case of beer. Krista, does he have a drinking problem, big sister? Beth, I don't think so, little sister. At least I've never noticed it before. Me, I don't have a drinking problem. I have an insanity problem. You are both stark, raving mad. Me, and if either of you hit me again, I'm going to throw you both overboard. Me, now I understand why in the old Dracula movies, the villagers always carried crosses to shield themselves against Count Dracula. I think I need a cross to shield myself against Count Krista, or at the very least sprinkle you with holy water. And I'm not even Catholic. Beth, see what I have had to put up with for the past 14 years, Johnny? Me, now I understand why you are a sadist who enjoys hitting and hurting people, Beth. And why you get turned on watching men throw up. Krista, wow? You get turned on watching men throw up, Beth? That's really kinky. Beth, with a huge smile. No, I told this idiot, my future husband, this the other night. I don't get turned on watching men puke. I just get turned on watching him puke. Krista, oh, good one, Beth. Beth, thanks, little sister. They exchange a high five. Me, I need a beer. Beth then explained to Krista what the EMT had said about heroes, and the next thing I know, Krista is in my lap, crying and giving me a hug and a kiss on my cheek. You are a hero, Johnny. You are my hero, and I will always love you. Always, she said. I told her I loved her, too, even if she was as crazy as the Mad Hatter in the book Alice in Wonderland. She laughed. Then Bethany replaced Krista in my lap, hugging me tightly and calling me a hero. She assured me that she would always love me. She also gave me a strong, enthusiastic kiss, so intense it felt like she was trying to take my breath away. At one point, Krista jokingly asked if we needed some privacy, then laughed and said, "Wait, we're on a boat. Do you two need a cabin?" Beth finally broke the kiss, leaving me gasping for air. Krista and I are going to get some sun. Johnny, why don't you join us? But first let me get you that beer. Beth brought me a beer a few minutes later, but not until changing into a bikini. A thong bikini. Oh my God. There couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 inches of cloth in the entire thing. At least Krista's bikini was more conservative. After I drank my beer, Bethany asked me for a favor. Johnny, Krista and I can't get the latch open on the door to the swim platform. Can you open it for us? Neither of us are very mechanical. I should have known. Both had already admitted they could break into my house anytime they wanted, bypassing my security system. but now they weren't very mechanical. I walked to the rear of the boat, then opened the latch and took a step onto the swim platform. Next thing I knew, her hands were on my back, pushing me into the water. I came up sputtering. Now, just who was going to throw whom overboard? Bethany asked. She and Krista were laughing their butts off. I climbed up onto the swim platform, then started chasing the girls. I caught Krista first, tossed her overboard, then Bethany followed a few seconds later. They climbed up and started chasing me. Soon they each had an arm, and I let them push me back in. After that, we took turns throwing each other overboard for a while. None of us was really fighting to be kept from being tossed into the water. And more than once or twice, Bethany and I exchanged kisses while swimming in the water. We were all really having a blast. Eventually, we got tired and Bethany and Krista decided to get some sun. I joined them for a little while and related the entire story about my past that I had already told Kelvin and Rachel. Then I left the girls stretched out on the sun pad while I grabbed my laptop and tried to complete an article one of the magazines I occasionally write for had requested. I knocked out the article in about 2 hours, then decided to cook us something to eat. I had bought steaks, plus potatoes for baking and lettuce, tomato, and cucumbers. I put the potatoes in the microwave, started the steaks on the built-in grill in the galley, and made a salad. Soon, the smell of the steaks brought both girls into the galley. "That smells delicious," Bethany said. After we ate, Bethany and Krista quickly cleaned everything up and I raised anchor. We spent most of the rest of the day boating up and down the inland waterway. Beth would sit with Krista for a while, then walk over to where I was driving, and we shared many, many kisses that day. Eventually, it was time to head back in, and we all regretted it. Bethany and Krista made me promise it wouldn't be too long before we were back on the boat for another day on the water. Once we arrived back at the marina, Bethany just pulled those incredible shorts over her thong bikini. It was absolutely the strangest, most bizarre day of my life. What really bothered me was it was also one of my most enjoyable days in years. Even if, or maybe especially because, I was with two certifiably crazy women. Once we were back at Beth's house, I really wanted to try to have a private conversation with Kelvin and Rachel. I was hoping they could talk some sense into their daughters' heads. Well, not so much Beth's, but Krista's. That didn't quite work out as I wanted, though. When we walked in from our time on the boat, Kelvin asked us how the day had gone. Before I could say anything, Krista excitedly spoke up. "Mom, Dad, today was amazing. Bethany and I have decided that Johnny and Bethany are going to get married and have at least 4 kids. And don't worry, I've got my future all planned out too." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Dear God, just take me now. A lightning bolt, an earthquake, anything. Just in this moment right now. I am in really good shape, physically. I run 2 or 3 miles on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I ride my bike 10 or 12 miles on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I also try to swim at least a mile every day. I've already told you what incredible shape Kelvin was in. His arms were massive. What I didn't tell you was he was a 4-year starter and a first-team, All-American middle linebacker for the Georgia Tech football team, where he had a reputation as one of the hardest hitters and meanest players in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Playing football accounted for his nose being broken multiple times. I knew I could easily outrun him in a race or any event requiring endurance, but when it came to strength, I didn't stand a chance. If he ever got truly angry and got a hold of me, he could probably break me like a twig, and I'm sure it would be much more painful than getting struck by lightning. Now, his youngest daughter, who had barely survived a dangerous situation 2 days ago, just announced that I'm going to marry his oldest daughter, have 4 kids, and then somehow be responsible for 6 more. Kelvin, Johnny and Bethany are getting married. Rachel, and having 4 kids. Beth, at least 4, maybe more. Krista, 2 girls and 2 boys, maybe more. Kelvin, and then he's going to, I'll help you raise 6 more. Rachel, with you. Beth, 6 girls with Krista. Krista, 6 girls just like me. Beth, 6 little Kristas. Kelvin, 6 little Kristas. Rachel, 6 little Kristas. Krista, 6 little Kristas. Just like me. Rachel, can humanity even survive 6 little Kristas? Kelvin, forget humanity. Can the planet survive 6 little Kristas? Rachel, Beth, does Johnny's mouth always hang open like that? It's a little unsettling. Beth, yeah, he did that all day. Rachel, Johnny, you should close your mouth before bugs start flying in. Krista, here, I'll push it shut again. I had to do that all day. Me. What? What is wrong with you people? Is this a house or an asylum? Your youngest daughter tells you I'm going to marry your oldest daughter and have 4 kids, maybe more, and then somehow be part of raising 6 more children, and all you can talk about is bugs flying into my mouth. Me. Am I the only one who sees how crazy this sounds? Am I the only sane person here who shouldn't be locked up? Kelvin, does he always get this worked up? Beth, that's one of the things I love most about him, Dad. He is very passionate. Rachel. Actually, Kelvin, you used to do the mouth open, emotional thing as well from what I remember. Krista. Dad's mouth would drop open like that? Beth. Dad used to get emotional like that? Rachel. Well, when your dad used to do it, he was a lot cuter. But I eventually broke him of the habit. Kelvin starts rubbing his shoulder. Yeah, your mom helped me break that habit. Sometimes my shoulder still hurts though. Krista. Look, his mouth is open again. Rachel. Really, Beth, I don't want to insult your husband and the father of your and Krista's children, but it does make him look kind of stupid. Krista. Well, I'll push it shut again. Beth. Wait, little sister, do you mind if I try something different first? Krista. Of course not, big sister. I mean he is going to be your husband. I'm just going to borrow him from time to time. Beth stepped in front of me until her body was pressed against mine. Then, in front of her parents, she took both my hands and put them on her butt. Pulling my head down, she then stuck her tongue into my open mouth. I'm not sure how long we kissed, or rather Bethany kissed me, but I woke up on the couch with Beth, Krista, and Rachel all hovering over me. Beth was very tenderly wiping my face with a damp cloth. What happened? I asked. Rachel sighed. Well, Bethany was hugging you, and you had just started patting my daughter's back and mumbling when you started talking about vampires and villagers. Then you mentioned something about Count Krista, Count Beth, and Count Rachel. After that, you started shouting for a cross and holy water. I didn't know you were Catholic, Johnny. Krista. He's not Catholic, Mom. Beth. He just gets a little emotional. That's why he needs me to look after him. Me. Beth. I owe you an apology for calling you a crazy, deranged pervert who gets turned on looking at men throw up. I was obviously wrong. Your entire family is crazy and deranged. They are stark, raving mad. Kelvin. Beth. You get turned on watching men throw up? Rachel. That's really kinky, Beth. Krista. I told her the same thing, Mom. Beth. Mom. Dad. I've already told this idiot who is going to marry me and be the father of my 4 children that no, I don't get turned on watching men throw up. I get turned on watching him throw up. Rachel. Good one, Beth. Beth and her mom exchanged a high five. Me. I need a beer. Kelvin actually brought me a beer, which I downed in a single swallow. Look, Johnny, I kind of know what you were going through, since I went through something similar myself. Not quite as bad as what you went through today, but similar, said Kelvin. 5 minutes after I met Rachel, she told me I was going to marry her, have 2 children, and we would start our own company selling guidance components for missiles to the Defense Department. The biggest difference is I only had 1 complete lunatic to get used to, while you were getting triple teamed today. You have 3 lunatics you have to get used to, he said. Beth, laughing. Good one, Dad. Krista. Big sister, you do realize he is talking about us? Beth. Hey, Krista and I can hit, too, Dad. Rachel. That's my girls. Me. I need another beer. Rachel. Beth. Does he have a drinking problem? Krista. Earlier today, when I asked the same thing, he said he didn't have a drinking problem. He had an insanity problem. He called us nitwits and told us we were insane. Rachel, what did you do? Krista. Bethany has already claimed 1 shoulder. Rachel. That's my girl. Krista. So I used the other shoulder. Only I can't hit as hard as Beth. Rachel. Laughing. Don't worry, sweetie. As you get older and stronger, it won't be long until you can hit as hard as Bethany and I. From what I've seen so far, it looks like you will have plenty of practice. Me practice? Kelvin. Look, girls, you aren't really helping here. Let me try to explain some things to Johnny. Johnny, you are just suffering from total sensory overload. You have just had too much information presented to you today, and you are having trouble processing it all. There's no other way to say it, Johnny, but you passed out a few minutes ago. Me passed out. Beth. Yeah, passed out. I must be an even better kisser than I thought. Rachel. If you were a Southern belle, Johnny, 100 years ago, they would say you swooned. Me, turning red. Swooned? Beth swooned. Krista laughing swooned. The father of Beth's 4 kids and my 6 swooned. Before I could even say it, Rachel, Bethany, and Krista all, in perfect unison, said, I need a beer, then broke up laughing. Me. Hell, I need a case of beer, which provoked even more laughter from the 3 female members of the insane asylum. Kelvin. Look, Johnny, we aren't talking about normal women here. If there is really such a thing as normal women. All 3 have a genius level IQ. Me. Normal women? Kelvin. Yes, normal women. You have to learn that once they set their minds to something, it is a lot easier and less painful, rubbing his shoulder, to simply go along. Me. Less painful? Rachel. Does he always repeat everything he hears? Krista. I think so. Beth. That's one of the things I love most about him, Mom. Rachel. As I recall, your father did the same thing when we first met. Krista. Daddy used to repeat everything you said? Beth. How cute. Kelvin, turning slightly red. Yes. Well, that was a long time ago. Rachel, exactly how is this going to work, Beth? Marriage to you, for kids, and then 6 kids with Krista? Beth, well, for the past 6 months Krista has been his financial manager. Of course he didn't find that out until today. Krista, Mom, can you believe well over half his money was in passbook savings? Kelvin, passbook savings? Rachel, passbook savings? What? Is he some 90-year-old widow? Krista, even worse than that, Mom. The rest of his money was earning way less than 3% interest. But for the past 6 months, since I changed his investment portfolio, he has been earning over 20% interest. Rachel, way to go, Krista. Boy, he really needs the 2 of you. Beth, Johnny has agreed. Me, Johnny didn't agree with anything. Beth, Johnny will agree to pay Krista 10% commission on anything he earns over 15% interest. Krista, hey, this is the first I have heard about only receiving a commission on earnings over 15% interest. Beth, my husband and I have to give you some kind of incentive, little sister. Krista, okay, big sister, but I think we need to change it to 10% on earnings between 15 and 20%, then 15% on earnings over 20%. Beth, that sounds reasonable, Krista. Kelvin, don't worry, Johnny, you're in very good hands. Me, that's what I'm afraid of. Beth, then when Krista's ready, she will pay Johnny and me a stud fee for Johnny's services. Me, turning red. Oh shit. I thought you were kidding. What am I, a piece of meat? Beth, a very cute piece of meat, Johnny. Rachel, yes, in a Neanderthal, barbarian sort of way. He reminds me of your father a little. Kelvin, thanks, honey. Rachel, so how much is the stud fee? Beth, we haven't actually discussed that yet. How much do you think, little sister? Krista starts walking around me, looking me up and down. I suppose it would be too much to ask for Johnny to take off his clothes. I would like to compare him to my favorite statue, Michelangelo's sculpture of David, she inquired. Me, not on your life, you little pervert. Krista, I love it when you talk dirty to me, Johnny. Rachel, Christine Lynn Adams, where did you hear that? Krista, watching some of Dad's DVDs, the ones he keeps on the top shelf of his closet in the bedroom, behind the old dirty football uniforms that you can't stand to touch. Rachel, Kelvin Adams, what DVDs is she talking about? Kelvin, barely audible and rubbing his shoulder again. I don't know. Honey, I don't really remember any of DVDs. Rachel, we'll talk more about that later tonight, while we are cleaning out your closet. Krista, oh well, sorry Dad. Anyway, I think a reasonable fee to pay for Johnny's services would be $1.25? Me, turning beet red. $1.25? Beth, come on, little sister. He has written 2 bestsellers. Both were made into movies, and you said his new book is the best one yet? Rachel, he has a new book? Krista, yeah, I found it when I hacked into his publisher's computers. Rachel, who finally stopped glaring at Kelvin, and with an unmistakable note of pride in her voice. You hacked into his publisher's computers? Krista, well, yes, but only after I broke into his house and hacked his laptop. Kelvin, who seemed really happy to change the subject. You broke into his house? Beth, he uses the security system you and Mom designed. Rachel, well, that must have been a piece of cake for you, Krista. Krista, yeah, it was real easy. In fact, it was, giggling, child's play. Rachel, in order to get the money to start our current business, Kelvin and I first started a security company, Johnny. Beth, Krista said his new book is the best one yet, Mom. Rachel, oh, you've got to let me read it, Krista. Krista, okay, Mom. Beth, now, back to business, Krista. He's already written 2 bestsellers, probably has a 3rd, had 2 movies made from his books, and is probably looking at a 3rd movie. Beth starts walking around me, looking me up and down. I suppose it really would be too much to ask you to take your clothes off, Johnny? Bethany asked. You 2 are nuts. I declared, in a strangled tone. Beth, I am thinking at least $2, little sister. Me, $2. I need a beer, Rachel, Beth, Krista, and Kelvin shouted in perfect unison, then all broke up laughing. I just buried my face in my hands. I think I may have begun sobbing. Kelvin, I've already asked once, but does he really always get this emotional? Krista, he seemed pretty emotional on the boat. Beth, I told you, that's one of the things I love most about him, Dad. Me, emotional, emotional, emotional. The 4 of you could make Michelangelo's solid granite statue of David break down and start weeping. Krista, actually, Johnny, the 17-foot-tall, 12,000-pound statue was carved out of a single block of Carrara marble, not granite. Kelvin, that's Carrara marble, Johnny, from the Carrara region of Italy. Rachel, when Krista was only 5, she made an exact, and I mean exact reproduction of Michelangelo's David, anatomically correct, out of Play-Doh. Smaller, of course. That is, the statue I mean, Not necessarily. Oh, never mind. I think I started sobbing harder. Rachel sat down on one side of me and Bethany on the other. They each put an arm around my shoulders. Rachel, I think Johnny has had all he can handle for one day, Beth. You need to take him home now and put him to bed. Here, honey. I saw Rachel hand Bethany a small overnight bag. Beth, what's this? Rachel, well, after he swooned, I could feel myself turning beet red. I prepared a few things you would need tonight. I have your toothbrush, toothpaste, perfume, and that new nightie you didn't know that I knew about. The see-through one you wrote about in your diary you bought just for Johnny. Just in case. Beth, turning beet red. You read my diary too? Rachel, what do you mean too? Who else read your diary? Beth, Krista had also read it, Mom. Rachel, Christine Lynn Adams. You should be ashamed of yourself. Bethany wrote things that were not appropriate for someone your age. Krista, Mom. Rachel, don't Mom me, young lady. Beth, not only did she read it, but she also told Johnny about some of the things I wrote. Rachel, Krista, you are so grounded until you're 21. Krista, Mom. But I have big plans for my future, and by the time I'm 21, I was hoping to have started a family, maybe even twice over. Rachel, well, maybe we can grant you an overnight pass or something. Kelvin, well, since we're all confessing. I read it too. I don't know what color comes after Coke red, Marlboro red, tomato red, or beet red, but whatever it is, that's the color Bethany turned. Beth, in a horrified tone, you read my diary, Daddy? Kelvin, yes, pumpkin. I read it too. I must say, reading some of what you intend to do to Johnny and what you want him to do to you, you are really creative, honey. Beth's blush deepened even more, if that is possible. I've never seen anyone's hands blush red before. Not near as creative as your mom yet. And now it was finally Rachel's turn to blush bright red. But pretty darn creative. Beth, actually, Dad, I didn't come up with all of the ideas. Some I got from Mom's DVDs, the ones she keeps hidden in the bottom of her dresser. Kelvin, Rachel Smith Adams. Now what DVDs is she talking about? Rachel, barely audible, but turning an even brighter red. Well, I think. I know it must have been some that were left over from years and years ago. A long time ago. A long, long time ago. Kelvin. So, are we going to clean out your dresser before or after we clean out my closet? That is if we don't start watching some of the DVDs. I think it was obvious to all of us. Well, at least Bethany and I, there might be some things getting cleaned tonight, but probably not a closet or dresser. Me, funny farm. Nut house. Loony bin. Insane asylum. Psycho ward. Rubber room. Madhouse. Rachel. Beth, before Johnny swoons again. Krista, giggling swoons. I love that word. I could feel my face turning red again. Rachel, or starts talking about vampires and villagers, crosses, and holy water. Maybe you should take him home. Beth, sure, Mom. Did you put any of my other clothes in the overnight bag? Rachel, no, honey. After reading what you have planned for the two of you over the next few days. Me days? Rachel, I didn't think either of you would need a lot of clothes. Beth and I both blushed. I'm only going to work half days for the next 3 days. Beth, said Rachel. That way I'll be home when Krista gets here, so she won't bother the two of you. Krista, Mom. I wanted to break into their house and watch. Rachel, I know you, Krista. Why do you think I'm planning on being home where I can keep my eyes on you? It turns out Rachel was right about one thing. Beth and I didn't need many, or any, clothes for the next few days. After our first time together that night, as Bethany lay gasping for breath, she said she had changed her mind. I'm going to tell Krista your fee is at least $5, maybe $10. And I actually felt very proud. By the end of our first 3 days together, Krista's future fee for my services was actually up to $500. And by now it seemed almost normal. I think this might be proof that when a normal person is surrounded by crazy people, the crazy people don't get any better, but the normal person starts behaving, well, less than normal. Someone else said it in a slightly different way. Some are born mad, some achieve madness, and some have madness thrust upon him. Emily Autumn, the asylum for wayward Victorian girls. I'm not sure if Rachel, Bethany, and Krista were all born mad or achieved madness, but collectively they have thrust madness upon me. And I think I might be starting to embrace the madness. 18 years later, I am 44, Bethany is 37, and Krista is 32. Bethany and I have been married for 18 years, since we tied the knot just a few weeks after our first 3 nights together. I have written 8 more bestsellers and have seen 5 of those turned into movies. I have also written a half-dozen children's books under my own name that I am really proud of, not bestsellers, but sales are not bad either. Beth has her 4 children, just like she wanted, 2 boys and 2 girls. The good news is there is a God in heaven, and he has a wonderful sense of humor. Krista has her 6 children from me all right. 6 boys. They drive Krista crazy. I used to laugh hysterically every time I thought about it. Thank you, God. Unfortunately, Rachel was right about something else. As Krista got older, she got bigger and bigger and a lot stronger. Krista is about 5 feet, 5 inches and perhaps 120 pounds. And incredibly beautiful, like her sister and mom. She also punches a lot harder than Beth. I don't laugh as much now, at least not where Krista can hear me. And as much as she would like to, she can't punch me for grinning. About 8.5 months ago, however, she informed me that she had no intention of quitting, not until she had her 6 daughters. And we would keep trying if it killed me. And if I didn't start producing favorable, to her, results, well, she might kill me anyway. Something finally worked, all too well. Krista is going to have triplets, all girls according to the sonogram. What I didn't know was a couple of weeks before my ultimatum from Krista, Bethany also decided it was time for her to have another baby since she wasn't getting any younger. So she stopped taking birth control pills. Beth is going to have twins, both girls. The good news is, Krista's due date is 2 weeks past Beth's. The bad news is, Krista is usually about 2 weeks early. And that presents something of a dilemma. In the first 7 years of our marriage, Bethany and I had, in order, a son, a daughter, and another daughter. By the time I got together with Krista, and she got pregnant, she is also incredibly fertile. Bethany and I decided to wait for a couple of years before having another. Every 2 years, for the next 12, Krista would have a baby. A boy. I still think it is so funny. Since I had already had 2 daughters and only 1 son with Beth, Krista absolutely knew she would have all girls when she finally got pregnant also. Beth and I actually timed our, I thought, final pregnancy in the year between 2 of Krista's boys. We carefully used 2 different OBGYNs for Bethany and Krista. I mean, why ask for people to talk? We weren't really taking extreme measures to hide our unusual relationship, but why make it easy for people to guess? We really did not see the harm in using the same hospital, because we didn't think they would really remember me. I mean, who remembers the dad? Just for the record, on the different birth certificates, the father of Beth's children is me, Johnny, but the father of Krista's previous 6 is Christopher Winfield Hunt. But now, even if Bethany and Krista adhere to their schedules, there would only be a 2-week period between births, and a fairly high likelihood someone will remember me. My biggest fear, of course, is Bethany and Krista will give birth on the same day. Knowing Krista, she would probably do it just to get back at me for giving her 6 sons. But I guess Beth, Krista, Christopher Winfield Hunt, and I will worry about that when the time gets here. I have 2 extraordinarily beautiful women who love me, and I love them both. Together we have 10 beautiful children, and that number will soon increase substantially. We all live together in a 32-room mansion in Florida, on 15 acres with its own private dock for my boat. At the insistence of both Bethany and Krista, Kelvin supervised putting in an exercise room that is packed with even more equipment than he has. Virtually every single day, even when they are pregnant, Bethany and Krista exercise for at least an hour. I had to start joining them, just for the sake of my own survival. The added muscle is the only thing keeping me alive when I do something to provoke them into hitting me. Yeah, they get lots of practice. The major difference now is either Bethany and I, or Krista and I, will frequently exercise at night, when all the kids are in bed. And clothing is optional. I think at least one of Beth's kids, and perhaps 2 or 3 of Krista's kids were conceived in the exercise room. Yeah, I have my own moments of creativity. The real winner from having 8 boys is Grandpa Kelvin. Yes, there is no doubt he loves both his granddaughters, but having 8 little football players in the family is simply the icing on the cake. And that actually turned out to be 9 little football players. When my oldest, little Kelvin, turned 6, Grandpa Kelvin signed him up for Pop Warner football, with himself as coach. Little Kelvin was easily the star of the team, playing both offense and defense. In fact, little Kelvin's teams never lost a game until he started high school. And in 4 years as a starter on his high school football team, he has only lost 2 games, one each his freshman and sophomore years. For the past 2 years, he has 2 state championships. Little Kelvin also has a perfect 4.0 grade point average all 4 years, and is now rated as the number 2 high school prospect by most of the scouting organizations. The ones that don't have him rated number 2 have him as number 1. He has been recruited by almost every team in the SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and Pac-12 conferences. I keep calling him Little Kelvin, although that is a little misleading. He inherited the best physical traits of both his grandfathers. My father, like me, was slender. Unlike me, my father was 6 feet, 2 inches tall. Big Kelvin, as you know, is rather short, but stocky with immense shoulders and huge arms and legs. Little Kelvin is a 17-year-old senior who is 6 feet, 2 inches tall, and weighs 245 pounds. In case you are wondering, There has never been a hint of jealousy between Bethany and Krista. They love each other and always have. They are both wonderful mothers, but Krista also has her research institute keeping her busy. She attended MIT, like her mom, and earned a double degree in molecular biology and computer programming before she was 18, then went on to earn a master's degree and a PhD. Dr. Krista, can you imagine it? Beth also earned a bachelor's degree in education, then a master's degree, and followed that up with her own PhD. So it is also Dr. Beth. The children are all homeschooled by Dr. Beth. She is a very tough teacher and doesn't let the kids get by with anything, at least during school hours. After school hours, the kids know she is an absolute pushover who will let them get by with almost anything. When each of the kids reaches high school age, we leave it up to them if they want to continue homeschooling or transfer to a formal high school. Obviously, little Kelvin did, but his next oldest sister, Rachel, decided to continue with homeschooling. Sister number 2, Alexandra, is actually probably the best athlete in the family and is getting ready to start high school. She is absolutely incredible in soccer and basketball and has already announced she plans on trying out for the high school football team as a kicker. She is also a star on her Pop Warner football team. Watching her kick a football is awe-inspiring. Both Big Kelvin and I have watched her nail kick after kick through the uprights from over 60 yards. While in the equivalent of elementary school, Alexandra is not even in high school yet, and she is already half an inch taller than I am and weighs 160 pounds, and not an ounce of fat on her. She is perhaps the most muscular woman, girl, I have ever seen, and usually spends at least twice as much time in the exercise room as little Kelvin ever did. Probably whip my butt, or brother Kelvin's, but without even working up a sweat. I don't even know what to write about my 6 boys with Krista. They each have Krista's brains and my sometimes smart alecky attitude. Some are really athletic and some are really bookish. All drive both Krista and me nuts. In fact, it seems like I tell at least one each day, I brought you into this world. I can also take you out. Of course I do love each of them. But at least once each day, Krista will ask me, do you know what your son did today? My 3rd son with Krista is most like me of any of my children. Not particularly athletic, but a world-class bookworm. He is writing stories at age 8 that have already won writing contests. Of course, he also plays football, but is a reserve on the team. All 6 of Krista's kids call Bethany Aunt Mom, or just Mom, while all 4 of Beth's call Krista Aunt Mom, or simply Mom. Somehow Bethany and Krista know which one is being called at any given moment. Of course, I am simply Dad, or Daddy to all 10. I do love and will always love Krista, but I am even more in love with Bethany than I was the day we got married. And she is still in love with me. And she still has a really creative imagination. Krista still reads Beth's diary without Bethany knowing about it, and has her own creative streak as well where she takes Beth's ideas and embellishes them. Yeah, embellishments. I will be the first to admit it. I live in a zoo, a loony bin, a nut house, and yes, a funny farm, and have never been happier in my life. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.